Hey, it's Tim, Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. And one of the best parts about being a journalist on YouTube is I get to read the comments you guys put below the videos. I know, it's shocking. Some outlets and some YouTube channels never check the comments. Other people say ignore the comments, but I tend to find them valuable because it gives me insight into what you're thinking as a viewer. And it allows me to tackle topics that are coming up a lot in the comments. So I thought we'd do a video like this. I'm going to call it the 5 myths, or probably more accurately, the 5 misconceptions or half-truths about electric vehicles. Things I see in the comments, things you guys point out. And let's go ahead and talk about these because I think it gets very interesting. I wrote a whole story on pickuptrucktalk.com. You can read it over there as well if you choose to not watch a video. That's fair enough. I'll read the comments over there too. So let's dig into this. So the first thing that comes up all the time in the comments, and it's pretty accurate, is a criticism about electric vehicles and how are they green. So for example, I'm sitting in a 2022 GMC Hummer EV, this 9,000-pound, 4.5-ton vehicle, and the question is, how is this green? How can this be a green vehicle? Well, let's talk about this. So is it green when it gets built? Well, we finally have some data for this, and I love data. So what we have is we have a company called Polestar. Polestar is a niche brand of Volvo, and they build electric vehicle. Now, they are the only automaker that is currently issued a life cycle carbon footprint on their vehicles. No other brand has done this. GMC hasn't done it. Neither Chevy, Ford, Ram, nobody. But they did it, and so it gave us some really good information we can use to talk about whether EVs are green. In the case of Polestar 2, I'm going to talk about metric tons of CO2 emissions. Now, real quick on CO2 emissions, there'll be a lot of arguments in the comments below. People are going to argue about CO2, whether it's good for the environment, whether it's not, whether it's created by plants, whether... Look, what I'm going to say about that is that every industry across the world and cities and countries are measuring themselves by the CO2 emissions they put out. So you have airplanes measuring themselves on CO2. You have railroads measuring CO2. You have commercial trucking. You have commercial plants. You have businesses. You have countries. You have cities. You have whatever. So that's the goalpost, is CO2 emissions. So that's what's going to be. Argue as you like. That's what we have today. That's how I'm going to talk about these numbers. So with the Polestar 2, we have 17 metric tons of CO2 emitted when they get the raw materials are refined. We have 7 metric tons of waste created when they create the battery. 2.1 metric tons of waste when they create the chassis. And they have 0.5 metric tons in disposal of creating this vehicle, or this Polestar 2. Now, what they did was Polestar 2 compared themselves to Volvo, a Volvo XC40. They're pretty similar vehicle sizes, pretty similar vehicles overall. That vehicle creates 16.7 tons of metric waste when it gets built. So it's a gas vehicle. I think it's straight gas in that case. So we have 26.6 metric tons for the Polestar 2 fully electric, and we have 16.7 tons of metric waste from the Volvo. So we have 10 metric tons of waste different. Okay, so yes, when the EV Polestar 2 drives off the assembly floor, it created more environmental damage than it did for a gasoline vehicle. So what's that mean? It means this. This is the whole truth. This is not the half truth, the whole truth. The whole truth is that that Volvo XC40 emits 475 grams of CO2 waste per kilowatt hour. Kilowatt hour is the measurement of energy and the supply that we have, and that's going to compare into the Polestar 2. So you'd have to drive the Polestar 2 68,000 miles for it to become net beneficial to the environment, to have less CO2. So it looks like this. So if you have a Polestar 2, you're going to create this much waste. Imagine this is a chart. I'm going up this much waste. And at the Volvo XC40, I'm going to create this much waste. As I drive the XC40, I create more pollution. As I drive the Polestar 2, I create no pollution, right? Or less than no, depending on your energy source. We'll get to that in a minute. So the idea is these lines intersect at some point, and then after that point, the Polestar 2 becomes more beneficial to the environment because it has less CO2 emissions. That's how that chart looks. And that's where people get confused, because they'll say, well, an EV is bad for the environment. Yeah, when you first buy it and drive it off the lot, but that's not the whole story. As Paul Harvey used to say, what's the rest of the story? The rest of the story is as you drive it, which is very ironic with EVs, but as you drive it, you get more environmental benefit. Now, the second thing that comes up a lot with this driving it is, where's electricity come from? people were saying, well, that's cool. Coal is powering all these EVs. And so that's kind of ridiculous. You're going to use coal, which we've decided as a society, I guess, that this is a bad energy source, emits a lot of CO2 emissions. And so now we're having coal going in these vehicles. What are we getting net benefits? But that's not the case. So I went to the Alternative Fuels Data Center provided by energy.gov. So the government provides energy data on this chart. I'll put it on the screen. Nationally, national averages for coal are 22% of the overall mix of energy that comes out of supplying vehicles. So we have, you got natural gas, you're going to have nuclear, you're going to have wind power, you're going to have solar, you have hydrogen, or not hydrogen, but water power, hydropower. Now, here in Nebraska, it makes a big difference, and Wyoming, I'm guessing the same. 49% of my power comes from coal here in Nebraska, right? And that's going to start changing over the years because they're building a nuclear plant over in Wyoming, and the state of California has got $1.1 billion to extend their nuclear plant to make it last longer. So these energy policy right now is switching not doing away from coal completely, just switching from coal to nuclear and renewable fuels to some degree. Now, in California, 0% of their power comes from coal, according to the Alternative Fuel Data Center, energy.gov. Now, I've talked to some people in the industry, and they do get some power from California, so I don't know how totally accurate these numbers are, but that is the number of information I have currently. So again, depends where you live. I'm at West Virginia, is probably a big coal state. Down south might be a big water power state. Just depends where you're at. So I think what's interesting, though, about the environmental benefit of EVs must be green, is what I see a lot of people say in the comments, and that's, why would you buy one? It's green. That's the only reason you buy this. Not so fast. Not so fast. So I'm going to buy an EV for my wife, because in her daily driving, she drives from here to a school, goes to school for an hour, drives 5 minutes next school, drive in school for an hour, drive next school for an hour. So she's always in and out of the car, and the car never has a chance to warm up. So one of the benefits in EV is it warms up even faster, because this, like I said, in the case of GMC, they have a heat pump. And so within 20 seconds on an average day, or a minute, I have hot air. And so she freezes all day. A thing that she doesn't like to do, she doesn't really like to get gas very often. Doesn't really like the gas station. So in EV, she plugs in every night, and for her driving range around the city, and she leaves town a little bit, she'd be fine plugging in every night. Don't worry about that. She doesn't really like maintenance. She doesn't really care for oil changes. I take care of all that stuff. And so she just doesn't like that stuff. So for her, in EV, she pulls in, she plugs it in, she has no maintenance, and she doesn't have to worry about being cold all day. And she drives around town electric power, which is a lot cheaper than it is for gas. So I can charge an EV at the house for pennies on a dollar compared to gas stations. Now, will that EV cost me more money to buy? Yeah, there's a cost that comes with those benefits I just discussed. EV is more expensive than gas. Insurance can be higher. If it's getting an accident, it's going to be cost more to replace. Yeah, those are all true statements. However, the benefits of having the EV, and also the smooth ride, the quietness, she's hard of hearing legally. She's actually legally deaf. And so having a quiet cabin, she can talk on the phone better, she can communicate better. Those benefits outweigh, in my view, the additional cost to purchase and the insurance. Does it make sense for everybody? No, it doesn't make sense for everybody. But I think in that particular case, I think for my wife, I think it'd be a perfect fit vehicle for her, because it fits the needs that she has that go above and beyond saying it costs more money and I'm charging with coal, right? So it's a bigger picture thing going on there. Another thing I want to talk about is the hours to charge. And I kind of alluded to this a little bit. There's been a lot of conversation in the comments, and some well-intentioned people seem like they're make some mistakes when they do stuff. It's really interesting. I've talked to friends and family. I've kind of blown their mind a little bit, because from a distance, if you only see the headlines, you're thinking, oh my gosh, Tim, this EV, this Hummer that you have, when I plugged it in at 220, when I had 17% charge, it was going to take 25 hours to charge. That's ridiculous. That's amazing. So the thought process was, so every 300 miles you want to go with this Hummer, it's going to cost you it's going to take you 25 hours to charge, and it's going to cost you too much time, right? So your time is money, right? In some cases, for me, some days it is. It's going to cost you quite a bit of money and time to charge this vehicle. And I'm like, but that's not accurate at all. So as we know, if we've learned, there's 3 ways to charge EVs. We have 110 charging, which is at home. It's just like plugging into your regular wall outlet. That's pretty much the most inefficient way to charge. I average 2 to 3 miles per hour of charging gained battery range plugged in that way. Just don't do that. It doesn't make any sense. You're charging for a long period of time. It's actually, to me, more of a hassle than it's worth. Number 2 way to charge is level 2 charger, which I have outside, which I've done videos on. I have a 50 amp breaker running on 6-aught wire that hooks up outside, and I can plug this in, and I gain 10 miles per hour of range when I was plugging this in the other night. Now, that range will vary as the 110 varies. As you get close to 100%, it slows down, takes a little bit longer to charge. There's preservation of the battery a little bit better on that. You'll see fluctuations as far as how fast it charges. A lot of EVs charge really fast, from 20 to 80%, right? The 3rd way to charge, and the 3rd way you're going to charge on road trips and towing really only. There are some people that charge with their EVs this way, but majority of people, road trips and towing only, would be a DC fast charger that puts out a lot more power faster. And so I can gain like 100 miles of range in like 20 minutes, depending on the vehicle, depending how much charge this vehicle can take. And that stuff's all fluctuating a lot, which makes EVs more confusing than anything else, because I can tell you this number right now, but you can go look at Nissan Leaf. It doesn't get that much, can't take that much. Ford Lightning cannot take as much power going in as, say, a Hummer could, or that stuff changes so quickly. So as of today, I'll say that if you were to go on a road trip, you use a DC fast charger, you stop, and we did this on a road trip to Denver. We stopped, we went and had lunch. We were going to have lunch anyways. We always have lunch on a trip no matter what. And so we just charged the 30 minutes there, added 100 and so miles of range, continued on our way. So it's a different type of road trip thought process, though. You're not trying to make good time. You're not trying to drive there and get there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and leave here at 2 in the morning and get right there and power through it and only stop for potty breaks. No, you just take your time a little more. So that trip took me another 30 to 45 minutes than maybe it normally would on a gasoline vehicle. Okay? Full stop. That's what it is. Now, DC fast charging is also really expensive. So keep that in mind too. So 95% of consumers who have EVs charge at home. It's cheaper. You don't care how long it charges, right? So I could plug it at night. I go and watch TV, go to bed, wake up next morning, and I basically have a full tank. Because most EV charging, people charge this every night. They plug it in. As the owner's manual of GMC Hummer says, you plug it in every night, right? That's why you use it. And I'm using the GMC Hummer as a backdrop. I'm not, not calling it out for anything, because this thing's fantastic. It's got 4-wheel steering. It turns on a dime. It's smooth. It's quiet. It's powerful. It's got full of tech. I mean, there's a reason why people buy these. This vehicle can't exist as a gas vehicle with today's emission standards. This thing is phenomenal. It's fantastic. It's $110,000. Full stop. It's expensive, but it's fantastic. And I can see why somebody would buy this, right? No maintenance. Don't worry about gas stations. Don't care about that stuff. You just want to charge every night when you get home, plug it in, drive around town. You have a cool looking vehicle. It's got a lot of technology, a lot of ability to do stuff. And it's really fast, smooth, quiet, powerful. Yeah, it's really cool. Number 3 thing that comes up a lot when talking about things is battery cost. It's really interesting to me, the conversations happening with EVs. So what I see a lot in comments and see a lot of people I talk to is the first question is, they talk a lot, is what's it cost? What's this vehicle cost? And then how much is the replacement battery going to cost? The people want to say, need to know today, right now today, how much I'm going to spend on a battery, because I know I'm going to have to replace it. So when I replace it, how much is that going to cost? That's the thought process. Well, it's an impossible question to answer. It's a tough, it really has a lot of variables to it. So let's talk about these variables. First of all, this battery is covered by an 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty, right? That's from the federal government's mandated, gotta have the warranty. And so if the battery fails, which what I've talked to some Nissan Leaf people, I've talked to some Tesla people, the battery typically fails in the first 100, 200 miles, or maybe 1,000 miles. You don't get to year 6 and the battery fails, right? Most often. If you have a good battery, you have a good battery, right? So that usually battery replacement's covered under warranty. It's expensive? Yeah, it's really expensive. And I'll get to that number in a minute. But the thing for me is people naturally assume that they're going to have to replace the battery. It's not an if it'll replacement, it's a when. And I find that fascinating because we don't see that. We've had Nissan Leafs, we've had hybrids with lithium batteries, we've had plug-in hybrids, we've had Priuses, we've had Teslas now for going on a decade. And what we're finding a lot as journalists, we talk to consumers and do a lot of research, is we're finding that the batteries aren't failing. Now they're degrading. They don't have the same amount of range they used to. And that depends on the battery and how you use it. You know, for example, there's a gentleman on the channel. I know he's going to comment. Cybertruck's going to comment. He's got a 100,000-mile Tesla vehicle, a sedan, and he lost 5% of range over the 100,000 miles. And he DC fast charges all the time, right? The things you shouldn't do, right? So what does that mean? So it means, in the case like for this, on a good day, I should get 360 miles of range. So if I lost 5% of my range, I'm looking at 18 miles. So instead of 360, I can go 342 or whatever I can do, right? That's your difference. And I think the gamble here is that in 8 years, if you decide to replace the battery, because you want that 18 miles of range back, if you decide to do it, and the battery can't be repaired, you know, a lot of times they're starting to do programs where you repair these batteries, get the range back. So the gamble is in 8 years, we'll have a bunch more fast chargers around. So I don't need to go to full 360 miles to get to a fast charger, because I have more fast chargers, right? And in my case, when I do navigation on the screen here, it tells me to stop, how long to charge, where to charge at, you know, how long I'm going to be there to get to my destination. So I don't think really anybody who owns an EV is really that concerned about battery replacement, because they're just looking at the range you're going to get and it fits their lifestyle. I think those who are critics of EVs or who are really concerned have a lot to say about battery replacement, right? But I think it's odd because we don't talk about gasoline vehicles this way. We don't include the gasoline vehicle motor purchase, how much it's going to replace when you buy a gasoline vehicle. And people will say, well, Tim, that's because we know gasoline vehicles go hundreds of thousands of miles and they'll go a million miles with just maintenance. And I'm like, who says an EV doesn't do that? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it been proven. Now, I've seen people, like I said, who want to replace a battery, and battery costs are expensive. So right now, today, as of right now, this moment, Reuters is reporting that a battery replacement is $160 per kilowatt hour. That's how we do this cost thing. We look at kilowatt hours. So this vehicle, this Hummer, costs $160 per kilowatt hour to build. Last year, that number was $106 per kilowatt hour. The year before was $160 per kilowatt hour. What does that mean? Well, remember when the Ford Lightning came out last year and was $150,000 for a crew cab truck with 230 miles of standard range? Well, that went up $7,000 year over year. The reason why? The kilowatt per hour battery cost, the $160, grew. It gained, what, $54 year over year. And so what we're going to see here, I think is going to happen, is we'll see these large fluctuations in pricing. We'll see it may go $220 kilowatt hour next year. And then all these mines come open and all this refining happens, all this stuff happens, and we'll see that number go back down. We'll see supply and demand. And so it's hard to say what the battery replacement is going to be in 8 years because we just don't know. Well, there's new chemicals coming out, new compositions, solid-state batteries. We may find replacement batteries. We can produce them cheaper, economics at scale. It's a variety of things. And so it's, like I said, if you want to talk about numbers, I bet you this GMC Hummer EV is $50,000 to replace the battery. I can't find a number for it, but I bet you that's probably what it's going to be. But again, that's not a when to replace a battery. That's an if to replace a battery. You don't actually have to. And like I said, I've known people that do it. A good example, TFL truck, Nathan, his daughter drives a Nissan Leaf, a used Nissan Leaf. It gets like 48 miles of range. So it lost like 20 miles of range last all the years have been used. I don't remember exactly what year it is. It's fine for them. His daughter drives to college in Boulder and back. That's all she does with it. And she doesn't need to drive that often because she's driving around town. He's like, I'm not going to replace a battery. I don't need to. I don't have to replace a battery. Another thing that happens a lot is number 4, recycling of batteries. People say, well, these batteries are going to come out of these vehicles. We're going to have thousands and thousands of batteries because these people are going to replace their batteries, and they're going to end up in landfills. They're going to sit out like these wind blades that they have for the wind turbines. We've all seen this photo. It's sitting in Wyoming. They have these big wind turbines because they're not recyclable. Lithium-ion batteries are currently not really recyclable. However, there's a lot of innovation happening. So what we're finding with these batteries from like Nissans and Teslas and things is they're taking the batteries out and using them as battery backups because the battery's not bad. It just has the same range it used to. So they're still going to use the batteries. So they're using the battery backups. I've seen emergency power utilities using them. Like you can charge these batteries up and go to a remote location, and here's this big battery that has a lot of storage to it. We're seeing that. We're seeing Toyota signed an agreement with Redwood companies. They're a company. They're in Utah. What they do is they're working on ways to do a full life cycle replacement of the battery or reuse of the battery. So they're taking Toyota hybrids, because they got a battery in them, and they're taking that battery out, and they're using it in a holistic way to make it more recycling. And we're going to see more and more recycling happen as years go on and it's more efficient. And again, I think it's going to drive down battery costs as well if we can find ways to reuse these batteries. And human nature is we'll find ways to reuse them, and science, and we'll use more technology to replace these batteries. But we're going to find that those batteries, we're going to create more supply of them through recycled batteries. And so we should see battery costs go down. Now, there'll be questions on when those replacement batteries are the same effectiveness as new battery, and yada. I mean, there's a lot of bridges to go. And look, EVs are very controversial. I'm not here to tell you to buy one or not to buy one, but let's talk about these one more thing. Number 5, EVs cost taxpayers. This comes up a lot in the comments. People bring this all the time. EVs cost taxpayers. And the idea here is the roads, the infrastructure, is paid for by gasoline taxes when you go to get gas in your vehicle. That's how this stuff's paid for. However, EVs don't use gas, so they don't pay the taxes. So taxpayers are footing the bill for these EVs. That's the thought process out there. The problem with that is it's not quite factual. There are 31 states that currently have legislation that charges EV customers more at the DMV for registration for having an EV to cover the loss of the road tax revenue, right? The other 29 states or whatever, how many states, I'm not, math's not my strongest suit, are probably going to start working on this as soon as they start seeing drops in tax revenue from gasoline. And you'll see this happen. The more, right now, EVs present 3% of the market. We're hoping to be 20% in a couple of years. When that happens, we'll see more and more states pass legislation, and we'll see those prices go up. Right now, a lot of EV customers in certain states can spend up to $200 a year additional just to register the EV because not paying the tax. 18 states have legislation built in for plug-in hybrid EVs. So those that just run on the battery. Like if you plug in overnight, you run battery at 30, 40 miles of charge, then you have the gasoline engine. You pay more at registration for those vehicles because of losing the gas tax. And so you're going to see that time and time again where, again, you could say, well, my state doesn't charge road tax because I'm not one of the 31 states, and that's wrong. And you are right. And your legislators and politicians, they should get on board and start passing laws in those other 20-some states to make sure that those states are collecting lost tax revenue. And again, we're going to see that happening. As soon as those states get smart and they start realizing that they're losing the gas tax, the revenue's going down in the next couple of years, you'll see more legislation going on. So you're going to, like I said, there's a lot of things to talk about the EVs. They are very controversial. They are not for everybody. This is not the future. You cannot. For example, with this, somebody asked me when I was driving this around, they're like, how far can you tow with it? I'm like, I don't care. Well, what do you mean? It's a truck. You got to be able to tow a long distance to do that. I'm like, this is not that customer. This customer doesn't care about towing distance. They don't care about hooking a thing up, right? So this guy's going to hook a set of ski-doos in the back and go to the lake 30 miles away, and he can go there and come back, no problem, because the aerodynamic profile of that trailer is pretty narrow. He can't hook up a fifth-wheel camper and go up to Montana. That's not going to happen. That will always be diesel, gas, and hydrogen. That's always going to be that case. And if you look at the laws being passed by these politicians, like in California's been trying for years now to go full EV, and they can't because the consumers, they don't always want it. They have high gas taxes. They've done everything they can. They keep failing because when it comes to towing and things, battery EVs just don't work. It just doesn't work for everybody. Now, certain circumstances, again, guy going to lake with a ski-doos works for him, but it's so hit or miss. What we'll see is gas and diesel last for a long period of time. You'll see these states have in their not laws or their aims or their statements saying we're going to go EV by year 2035, whatever. You see in there, if you read in details, they'll say except for commercial, except for trucks, except for this, except for that, except for this, except for that, because they can't. Right? It just doesn't make sense. I think you'll see with towing, you'll see gas, diesel, and you'll see hydrogen eventually. Toyota is starting to build hydrogen fuel cell semi-kits for Kenworth, and you'll see more semis on the road with hydrogen filling them because hydrogen emits water vapor, but also it's smoother drive powertrain with the EVs. There's no jerkiness. There's no beating up your body driving a semi-truck. I've ridden one of those semi-trucks that was fully hydrogen. You run the AC in the cabin all day long. You don't worry about diesel idling laws. You don't worry about any of that garbage when it comes to hydrogen. You don't worry about, so then, your maintenance costs are less. The battery's going to last a long period of time. And so you're just using hydrogen to charge a battery. again, it's a win-win-win for commercial. I think once you see more commercial spread across the country and they start I-80 gas stations and I-75 and I-60 and I-40 all have hydrogen, pull up gas station, you see diesel, gas, and hydrogen, I think you'll start seeing that roll out even more. But as of right now, this is a gigantically fun vehicle to drive. It's awesome. It's not for everybody. Nope, not everybody can afford it, and that's fine. There'll be more options as years goes by. There'll be more choices, and this to me is just an alternative fuel source. It's a choice. I believe that this vehicle is going to sell for consumers who don't look at this as just an EV. Don't look at this as just saving the environment. We look at it from a holistic viewpoint, a bunch of different factors. They don't want to be using gas. They don't like gas. They don't worry about gas prices. I mean, there's just a lot more factors involved in that. So again, a lot more stuff to talk about. Put your comments down below. Again, I like reading them. Check out videos over here. Website down below as well. As always, thanks for watching. I will see you down the road.